Good morning. Thanks for joining us today. So when it comes to church, spirituality, religion, do you ever feel like an outsider? I did. Yeah, growing up, I didn't feel like I was one of the righteous ones. Not at all. No, my brother and I did a lot of stuff at church that we really weren't supposed to. So I think it's kind of ironic that I ended up being a preacher. But then, 43 years ago, something like that, I started reading the Bible. And I really haven't stopped reading. Now, if you start right at the beginning of the New Testament, which is the whole part about Jesus, you start with something that people will tell you don't start with Matthew chapter 1. Why? Because it's called a genealogy. And old school, it would say so-and-so begat so-and-so. And you can't even pronounce the names. But it's really pretty interesting now, because I understand the story a little bit better. First of all, the first book of the New Testament is written by Matthew. Now, was Matthew, it'll even say St. Matthew. Okay. Would he have called himself St. Matthew? Not so much. He's also known as Levi, the tax collector. So the first book of the New Covenant is written by a guy who used to be a hated tax collector. You can read about it in the New Testament. There's also this guy, Zacchaeus, who was a tax collector. They were hated by the Jews. Hated. Why? Because the Romans hired them, paid them handsomely to extract whatever they could tax-wise out of their fellow countrymen. They were traitors. They were turncoats. I mean, whatever you want. So is it surprising then that in Matthew's genealogy, he gives us some insight into some things we wouldn't normally get? And some of these things I haven't always noticed, but it mentions the name of a prostitute in here. It mentions Rahab. Well, that's interesting. So Rahab is in the genealogy of Jesus. Didn't see that one coming. But then you wouldn't see a tax collector being one of the first preachers of the gospel, would you? Interesting. And then it also mentions Tamar in here. There's not a lot of women that are mentioned in here, but it mentions Tamar. Well, that's fascinating. Why is that interesting? Well, it's a long story, and she's more righteous than her father-in-law because her father-in-law impregnated her. It's a really weird story. But then she had twin boys, and one of those boys is in the lineage of Jesus. God's saying, through Matthew, I can take your broken world and I can straighten it out. And I can use you no matter what terrible things have happened to you. I can turn it around. There's other names I could go into here, but also he's the one that mentions the mysterious magi. We call them the wise men, the three kings. We don't know how many there were. And that's the story for Christmas. But those were outsiders. Those weren't people that were following the Jewish religion. So let's take Mark. Mark writes the next gospel. Actually, it was written first. What's he known for? This drama that happens in the book of Acts. He's a young man and he quits. He's out on a mission journey with Paul and Barnabas. And he quits. And then he becomes a point of contention. There's all this drama around him. Then you've got Luke. Is he an insider? Hardly. He's the only Gentile who writes anything in the New Testament. Then you've got John. John, what was his degree? Fisherman. Nothing against fishermen, but it's not a master's of divinity. It's not a doctorate. None of those things. But who does Luke write to? This character called Theophilus, which is not too hard to figure out if you know any Greek. It means lover of God. So you might feel like an outsider, but if you're attracted to God, don't let some stuffy religious types keep you away. Get to know God. Love God. When I started reading the New Testament 40-some years ago, I felt like I was an outsider. It cracks me up that I ended up being a preacher. What does God really look for from us? There's a great verse from Micah chapter 6, verse 8. And I'll wrap it up with this. O people, the Lord has told you what is good, and this is what He requires of you, to do what is right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. May you realize today that God wants you on the inside, not the outside. And it doesn't matter what your past is. God bless you, and may you have a wonderful day and a wonderful future.